For 10 years straight, I set the table like it meant something. Not just the plates and glasses, not just the roast or the wine I picked with too much care, but the space itself. I set a place for peace, for family, for the kind of connection I thought mattered. Every Sunday, without fail, our door opened to Celia's family and to my best friend, Terrence Burke. I made it easy for them. I made it warm. Every napkin folded right. Every bottle of red aerated just in time. It wasn't about status, it was about ritual. And I believed in it like a religion. I used to call Sundays our standing appointment with joy. Corny, I know, but I needed it. I worked all week in logistics, grinding through freight invoices and missing margins, and Sundays were the exhale, the reset. My version of peace was watching Celia's father close his eyes after a bite of slow-cooked brisket and nod in approval like I'd earned my place again. Her sister Alondra always requested the same dessert. Pear tart with nutmeg whipped cream. And Terrence, my so-called brother, always showed up first and left last. He helped me chop onions. He helped me season the steaks. He laughed at my bad jokes, poured the drinks when my hands were full, even did the dishes sometimes. That was the version of him I believed in. And that version of me, the one who trusted, was dying slowly and didn't know it yet. Looking back, I should have seen it. The signs weren't subtle. Celia had started sitting further away from me on the couch. She stopped reaching for my hand when we were alone in public. Her compliments dried up like forgotten roses in a vase, brittle and silent. And Terrence? He started staying behind after everyone else left. At first, I thought it was just the bond. We used to be inseparable in college. I was his best man. He was mine. We talked in code, laughed about professors we both hated, dreamed up a fake restaurant we'd open someday when we were rich and old and bitter. I thought we were building memories. Turns out, I was just hosting rehearsals for a betrayal I wasn't meant to see. I remember one Sunday, about a year before it all came crashing down. Celia wore a blue wrap dress I'd bought her for our 7th anniversary. She hadn't worn it in months. I thought she did it for me. I grilled salmon. Made the orzo with lemon zest just how she liked it. Terrence showed up wearing a new watch and shoes I hadn't seen before. He complimented her dress before I had the chance to. She laughed, a soft, private sound, and touched his arm. I don't know if anyone else saw it, but I did. Just a flicker. A pause too long. That glance. That was the moment I started keeping track of details I didn't want to admit. Still, I cooked. I hosted. Because that's what men like me do when they believe they're building something sacred. We keep traditions alive even when the foundation is already cracked and rotting. I told myself I was keeping the family together. That I was the glue, the peacekeeper, the servant of legacy. But really? I was feeding people who came only to consume. No one brought a dish. No one offered to clean anymore. They just arrived, settled in, and soaked in the warmth like it was owed to them. And I kept delivering. Like a fool. Even the way they talked to me changed. Her father used to ask me about work. Slowly, he shifted to comments like, "Still at the same company, huh?" Her mother, Mona, used to compliment my cooking. Eventually, her praise turned into passive-aggressive lines like, "You should consider catering. At least you're good at something." And Celia, Celia, stopped looking me in the eyes when I spoke. I thought she was tired. I thought maybe she was burned out. I offered couples therapy. She laughed in my face. But Sundays? They remained untouched. Like a sacred relic we all bowed before. And I kept pouring wine. I kept offering more bread. I kept believing that maybe if I gave enough of myself, they'd see me again. Terrence would toast to me sometimes. Say things like, "This guy right here, the real MVP." And everyone would nod and smile and chew on the food I paid for, in the house I cleaned, under the lights I replaced when they flickered. I mistook performance for gratitude. I confused presence with loyalty. That was my sin. The day everything changed, I was standing in the kitchen watching Terrence open another bottle of wine. Celia walked in, her hair damp from a long shower. She wore my college sweatshirt, mine, and smiled when Terrence handed her a glass. They clinked glasses like co-conspirators, like something unspoken had already been agreed upon. And I just watched. Stupid. Still hoping. Still believing in something I hadn't realized was already dead. It wasn't until weeks later, when I found the text messages, that the truth ripped through me like a fire through dry wood. Messages going back months. Conversations about next steps and getting through the legal stuff. I scrolled, dizzy, reading Terrence's words to her. He's too soft. He won't fight it. And hers, I know. Sundays won't be the same, but at least we won't have to pretend anymore. They didn't even hide it well. Like I wasn't a threat. Like I'd never fight for anything. That's when I realized they hadn't just shared a bed. They'd shared my generosity, my traditions, my faith in people. And they spit it back at me like gristle on a plate. I canceled Sunday dinner after that. No explanations. No speeches. I just didn't open the door. I let it ring. I let the text pile up. I let the silence answer them. Celia moved out the next week. Terrence didn't call. I stood in the kitchen that Sunday with the lights off, no music playing, no wine breathing on the counter. And I realized maybe Sundays weren't sacred. Maybe I was. And I'd just been feeding the wrong altar. The smell of burned insulation sticks to your skin, clings to the folds of your clothes, even after the flames are gone. That night, as I stood on the curb watching what was left of my rental go black under the fire chief's flashlight, I didn't feel panic. Just silence. The kind that seeps into your ribs and sits there, heavy and wet. The smoke rose into the cold night air, swirling into a sky too indifferent to care. My home, what little of it I had after the divorce, was now a charred outline. The walls were still smoldering, glowing faint orange like dying embers behind my eyes. Electrical fault, the guy in the yellow helmet said again, as if saying it twice made it better. Old wiring. You were lucky you were out when it sparked. Lucky. That was the word he used. I stood there in my only suit, the one I'd worn to a client meeting earlier that day. I had driven straight from work, planned to microwave leftovers and maybe scroll through job boards for better-paying gigs. Instead, I came home to fire trucks and police tape. The kitchen where I used to cook Sunday dinners? Gone. My books, the tools my dad left me, the framed photo of my mother when she was 19 and laughing in the back of a cab in New Orleans, all ash. The only things I had left were my phone, my wallet, and the damn suit on my back. No one came. I called 3 people that night. My cousin in Dayton voicemail. A guy I used to work with out of town. And then, finally, I called Terrence. My best friend. My brother in everything but blood. The man who toasted my wedding, gave a speech that made half the room cry. Surely, he would offer a couch. A spare bed. Hell, a blanket. The phone rang longer than it should have. When he picked up, his voice was casual, almost distracted. Yo, Marcus, he said, like he didn't notice the urgency in my tone. Terrence, I said, my voice thinner than I meant. Hey, listen. I need a place. Just for a few nights. My place caught fire. What? Damn, man. You serious? Yeah. Electrical short or something. The whole thing's gone. I've got nowhere to go. There was a pause. A long one. I thought maybe the line cut out. Damn, he said again, slower this time. Then came a sound I didn't expect, laughter. Soft, clipped. I waited for the empathy, the concern, the invitation. Instead, he said, we're not running a shelter. I blinked. What? I mean, come on, Marcus, he continued, as if I had just asked him to donate a kidney. It's not really a good time. You know how things are. I was so stunned I didn't even reply at first. My mouth opened, but no words came. It's just not a good look, he added. I mean, you know, after everything. After everything. The words slammed into me like a crowbar to the ribs. I forced a breath. I'm not asking for much. Just a couch. A few days. Until insurance calls me back. Please, man. Terrence exhaled sharply, then gave that kind of sigh people give when they're done pretending. You'll figure something out. You always do. Then a shuffle. A click. Except he didn't hang up all the way. And that's when I heard it. Celia's voice. Faint, but unmistakable. Did he actually ask to stay here? Then her laugh, clear, cruel, and unbothered. Told you he'd come crawling. Cheers to freedom, Terrence said. I heard the clink of glass. Music in the background. Was that jazz? I stayed frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear like a lifeline turned into a knife. The call ended without ceremony. Just silence again. I drove back to what was left of the house. They'd already roped it off. The smell was worse now, wet ash, melted wiring, scorched paint. My car was the only thing spared. Old, dented, but intact. I crawled into the back seat, still wearing the same suit, and stared out the window at the skeleton of my life. I had a smoke-stained blanket I kept in the trunk from an old road trip. I wrapped it around myself. It smelled like old pine trees in disaster. I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. I just stared at the ceiling of my car, blinking at the small dome light, listening to the wind tap against the glass like it was mocking me. I could still hear them. Celia's laugh. Terrence's toast. Cheers to freedom. Freedom from me, I guessed. Freedom from the man who cooked their dinners, cleaned their dishes, mowed their lawn, paid their bills, and built their lives. And now, freedom to dance together over the ashes of what they left behind. I thought I might cry. I thought maybe that would be the release. But no tears came. Just cold. Just the hum of grief settling into something else, something heavier. Anger didn't come yet. That came later. That night, all I felt was the echo of that call. Over and over. Like a loop I couldn't shut off. The clink of their glasses. Her voice. That damn laugh. Morning came slow. Gray. Quiet. I sat up, bone stiff from the angle of the seat. My back ached like I'd been beaten in my sleep. I looked out at the smoldering ruin of my rental and whispered to no one. So this is rock bottom. I wasn't wrong, but I wasn't done either. I started the car to charge my phone. 1% battery. Just enough to see the time. Just enough to let the voicemail from my cousin finally come through. Hey Marcus. Sorry I missed your call. If you still need a place, call me back, all right? I didn't. Because something in me had already decided I wouldn't beg again. The phone was still warm against my cheek when the silence finally settled. Not the kind that calms you. The kind that sits next to you like a brick on your chest. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just held that phone there, like keeping it close might change what I'd heard. My best friend, no, former best friend, Terrence Burke, laughing about my pain. And Celia, her voice still ringing in my ear like an echo laced with poison. Told you he'd come crawling. I closed my eyes and let the words replay, slow and sharp, each syllable digging deeper. I should have hung up the moment he dismissed me. I should have thrown the phone across the car, screamed, something. But I didn't. I stayed. I stayed and listened to the sound of people I once loved clinking glasses over my misfortune. I'd offered them everything: time, love, loyalty, and in return, they toasted to my collapse. Cheers to freedom. Freedom from me. That's what it meant. They weren't celebrating the end of a toxic relationship. They were celebrating the freedom to be who they really were, without guilt, without shame, without me standing in the way of whatever they'd been building behind my back. I had fed them, sheltered them, trusted them. And now, I was the punchline at their dinner party. The battery died just after that. The screen went black, and with it, the only remaining piece of connection I had to the world. I sat in my car, blanketed in smoke-scented wool and betrayal, watching the last curl of steam rise from the ruins of the rental. The wind had kicked up overnight. It carried the smell of scorched wood and something deeper, finality. I didn't cry. I just stared at nothing for a long time, until my eyes blurred and my breath went shallow. My hands were still clenched. I only noticed because my knuckles ached. I opened them slowly, one finger at a time, and realized my nails had dug into my palms hard enough to leave dents. I wiped them against my slacks, forgetting how ruined they already were, how the ashes had settled on everything I owned. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. I stayed curled in the back seat, arms folded, eyes locked on the dashboard like it owed me answers. I kept replaying the call. Not just the words, but the tones. The laughter. The way they sounded so alive, so vibrant, while I sat surrounded by the charred skeleton of my life. I'd spent so long blaming myself for the marriage falling apart. Maybe I wasn't exciting enough. Maybe I worked too much. Maybe I didn't notice the right details. But now, I could see clearly. They weren't miserable. They weren't lost. They were relieved. Happy, even. Not because they were finally free, but because they'd been waiting for this moment, my bottom. My wreckage. My submission. I don't know how long I sat there before the sun came up. The dawn cracked gray and slow, turning the sky above the blackened house a pale, bruised blue. The smell was worse in daylight, like something had died and been cooked through. I stepped out of the car and stretched, bones creaking like rusted hinges, and walked around the property one more time. Nothing salvageable. Not even a photograph. A neighbor I didn't know walked by with a dog and gave me a tight nod. Sympathy in her eyes, but no words. I was used to that look by now. The pity. The polite distance people give when they don't want your damage rubbing off on them. I walked back to the car and sat in the driver's seat. My phone was dead, but I had a charger. I turned the ignition and watched the screen flicker back to life. I didn't scroll. I didn't check messages. I just stared at the wallpaper for a while, a picture of the ocean I'd taken last year on a trip Celia had refused to join me on. She'd said she was too busy, probably with him. The messages started flooding, and once I reconnected, Insurance. Spam. One from my cousin, asking if I was okay. I didn't respond. My fingers hovered over the screen like they didn't belong to me anymore. But then I remembered something else. Something tiny. A detail buried in the voice call. Music. There had been music in the background while they laughed. A song I recognized. Not random, not from a playlist. It was Celia's favorite, one I used to play on Sundays. The fact that it was playing now, in that moment, during their private little celebration, told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't guiltless. This wasn't two people falling in love after a tragedy. This was rehearsed. Timed. They'd waited until I was nothing, until I had no one. And then they clinked their glasses and smiled. That's when something inside me stopped folding. I stared out at the ruined house, and for the first time, I didn't feel the sting of loss. I felt space. Space for something new. Not revenge. Not yet. But clarity. I would remember the exact tone of Celia's voice when she said I'd come crawling. I would remember how Terrence laughed right after. And I would remember that I hadn't begged. I'd asked. Once. They closed the door. Now it was my turn to stop knocking. That morning, I didn't shower. I didn't eat. I didn't call anyone. I sat in the parking lot of a diner until they opened and used their outlet to charge my phone. I washed my face in their bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. My eyes looked older. My jaw clenched tighter. But beneath the exhaustion, I saw something else. Not hope. Not yet. But something sharper. I wasn't dead. And I wasn't done. By the third night in that smoke-scented sedan, my back had learned the language of pain in new dialects. I shifted in the back seat again, but there was no right position. Everything hurt. My neck. My knees. Even my pride had started to ache. The blanket was no longer warm, just damp with the sweat of survival. I stared at the ceiling of the car as if answers might appear there, written in fog on the glass. But all I saw were stains from the fire. Ashes on the inside of the windows. Ashes inside of me. My stomach growled again. I'd been rationing gas station peanuts and water for 2 days. My bank card had declined that morning at the diner. I was down to $14 and a pocket full of receipts from a life that no longer existed. I couldn't go on like this. I knew that. But I didn't know where to go, who to call. Everyone I used to count on had either disappeared or clinked glasses behind my back. And that's when I remembered the clause. It hit me out of nowhere, like a light bulb breaking in the dark. That line in the divorce agreement. It had barely registered when I first read it, probably because at the time, I was too busy grieving the collapse of my marriage to care about fine print. But now, in the silence of this mobile tomb I was calling home, I replayed my lawyer's words. She rushed the settlement, he'd said. Didn't fight the reversion clause. She probably assumed you'd never trigger it. Back then, I didn't think I would either. I didn't even fully understand it. But something about the phrasing buzzed in my head now like a faint alarm. If the insurance payout exceeds the property's appraised value and is not reinvested into equivalent residential real estate within 90 days, the property's original co-owner retains partial equity rights. My eyes widened. I shot upright so fast I cracked my head against the roof. Pain flashed, but I didn't care. I was already scrambling to pull my bag from the front seat, digging through old receipts and random junk. My fingers moved on instinct, desperate. I had emailed everything to myself after the divorce, just in case. Back then, it felt like digital hoarding. Now, it felt like a lifeline. I tethered my phone to the car's engine with the last bit of gas I could spare, turned on the hotspot, and logged into my cloud storage. I searched divorce agreement. Found a folder. Then a PDF. My hands shook as I scrolled. There it was. Section 14. Subsection C. Reversion clause. Highlighted. Initialed by both parties. Dated and notarized. A rush of heat moved through me. Not from the car, but from the sheer force of realization. Celia had already spent the insurance money. I'd seen the real estate post. A sleek little condo in Charleston. She and Terrence had posted smiling photos on the balcony a few days after the fire. Wine glasses in hand. A new life begun. Too soon. Way too soon. I scrambled to check dates. The fire happened just over 60 days ago. I hadn't thought to check how fast she moved because I hadn't thought I had the right to. But now I had a foothold. If she used the insurance payout to buy a non-equivalent property before 90 days passed and didn't reinvest into property of equal or greater value tied to our original residence, then that condo wasn't just hers. It was half mine. Not because I wanted it, but because the paper said so. I sat back in the seat, stunned. The power I thought I'd lost wasn't gone. It had just been buried in bureaucracy. In the fine print, she'd been too arrogant to read, too rushed to question. And Terrence, that smug bastard, didn't even think to hire his own lawyer. He moved into her new place like he was claiming a kingdom, but that crown sat on a clause he hadn't earned. I started breathing harder, not from excitement, but from restraint. I didn't want revenge, not in that moment. What I wanted was footing. I wanted the ground back beneath my feet. I wanted to stand again, not in spite of them, but because I remembered who I was before they made me doubt myself. She thought she was free. He thought he'd won. But neither of them read the whole story. I backed out of the cloud folder and began screenshotting everything. The PDF, the timestamps, the highlighted text. I saved it in 3 different places: my phone, my backup drive, even emailed it to a new address I made just for this purpose. I wasn't sure what I'd do next. Not exactly. But for the first time in months, I had something they didn't know I had: leverage. I opened the voice recorder app and began speaking quietly, documenting everything. Day 3. Still sleeping in the car. No help from Terrence or Celia. Confirmed insurance payout exceeded original appraisal. Found clause in divorce settlement. Legally binding. My voice sounded strange in the playback, tired, thin, but calm. I stared out the windshield at the empty street. The house was still dark and crumbling behind the caution tape, but something inside me felt newly lit. A slow-burning ember of control, of choice. And in that moment, I made one. I wasn't going to warn her. Let her keep toasting. Let him keep smiling. Let them keep thinking I was curled up somewhere, broken and forgotten. I would move quietly. I would do it right. I didn't want to humiliate them. I wanted the truth to speak for itself. And now, finally, I had the language. I didn't go after her with fists or fire. That would have been too easy, and it would have made me look like the bitter ex-husband she was already painting me as. No, I needed something cleaner, smarter. The kind of move that wouldn't just speak, but echo. Something undeniable. That's when I remembered Layla Cummings. She was a local journalist, sharp as glass and twice as dangerous. We'd met 3 years earlier when she ran a piece on a charity I'd volunteered with. Back when I still believed Sunday dinners made a man good. She'd asked smart questions back then, the kind that saw past the PR statements and platitudes. She'd seen me, not just the smiling husband with barbecue tongs, but the man who gave quietly, who built without needing credit. We hadn't spoken since. But now, I had a story. One that bled betrayal and carried receipts. So I found her number buried in an old email and sent a message. You once said you were looking for a story that wasn't afraid to get ugly. I think I've got one. It's personal, but it's real. Let me know. She responded within 20 minutes. Talk to me. I called her from the car, parked outside an old mechanic shop with Wi-Fi I could borrow from the lot. I leaned back in the driver's seat, steadying my breath as the phone rang. Marcus Camden, she said as soon as she picked up. Didn't expect to hear from you. You okay? Not remotely, I replied. But I've got something you'll want. Her tone shifted immediately. I'm listening. So I told her. Everything. Not with drama or flair, but with facts. 10 years of Sunday dinners. A best friend who sat at my table while sleeping with my wife. A house fire that took everything. A call for help rejected with laughter. A divorce clause she never expected to matter, and the proof that she'd tripped it. You have the paperwork? She asked. I have the clause, I said, highlighted, signed, scanned. I have the insurance payout report and the closing documents on the condo in Charleston, public record. She used the money to buy it before the 90-day window closed. And the call? I recorded it. Not intentionally, it was still live when they started talking. You can hear them. Toasting. Laughing. She says, told you he'd come crawling. He says, cheers to freedom. You hear the clink of glasses. There was silence on her end for a moment. Then, Marcus, are you sure you want this published? This isn't just a splash in the local pond. If I run this right, it'll catch. People love these stories, especially when the villain smiles and pearls. I didn't hesitate. I'm done being quiet, I said. She asked me to send everything, documents, recordings, timelines. I packaged it up like a case file and hit send. Within the hour, she'd replied, Jesus, this is gold. Give me 48 hours. I parked overnight behind the old dry cleaners that had shut down last year. They had an awning that kept the rain off the windshield, and the alley beside it didn't smell too bad. I didn't sleep, not really. Just rested my eyes and imagined their faces when it broke. And break it did. 2 days later, I walked into a cafe to charge my phone and saw it first on my screen, an alert from the local news site. Man left in burnt-out car after divorce. Best friend says, "We're not running a shelter." My jaw clenched, but I couldn't look away. They'd used a photo from my wedding. Me, Celia, and Terrence smiling like a perfect portrait of unity. Below it, a subheader. Local journalist uncovers betrayal, lost home, and hidden clause in viral expose. I scrolled through the article, heart pounding. It wasn't salacious. It was methodical, brutal in its calm. Layla had laid it out like a puzzle, chronology, evidence, quotes. She blurred out Celia's voice on the audio but kept the context. She published the line, "Told you he'd come crawling." She let the world decide. The story hit TikTok the next day. Some influencer clipped the audio over a photo of a burnt-out house and stitched it with text. This man cooked Sunday dinner for 10 years, and this is how they repaid him? Within 24 hours, it had 1 million views. I started getting messages from strangers. Men, women, divorced, abandoned, people who saw themselves in my story. Some sent kind words. Some offered places to stay. One guy Venmo'd me $50 with a note that just said, "For your next Sunday meal." I didn't expect the wave. I didn't crave the attention, but I didn't run from it either. Because it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone who gave, and gave, and gave, and got nothing but silence in return. That night, I drove past the new condo. I didn't get out. I didn't need to. The lights were on in the top floor. A shadow moved behind the curtain. I imagined her sitting on that balcony, wine in hand, reading the headline. I wondered if she still wore the pearls. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even satisfied. But I was seen. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. It started as a trickle. A few notifications. A couple texts from numbers I didn't recognize. Then it turned into a flood. Within hours of the article dropping, the internet grabbed my story and ran with it like it was a torch in the middle of a blackout. By morning, my name was trending, not in the top 10, not even regionally. National. Marcus Camden was everywhere. The quote hit first. Terrence's words, those 5 careless syllables, plastered across headlines, captions, and memes. "We're not running a shelter." It was repeated with the kind of venom only the internet can conjure. TikTok stitched the audio of the call under images of burned homes and broken hearts. One creator reenacted the scene with cardboard cutouts. "Best friend of the year," they said, fake crying and holding a plate of air while a house cutout burned behind them. But the moment it really exploded was when someone unearthed the wedding photo. A still from our happiest day, me in a navy tux, Celia glowing in satin and pearls, and Terrence standing next to us in a tailored gray suit, his hand on my shoulder like he owned the moment. Someone zoomed in on that smile, his easy, relaxed grin, and added the caption, "The best man at pretending." That image alone hit 5 million views in 2 days. And you know what? I didn't feel humiliated. Not even a little. Because for the first time in this entire mess, people were listening. Not just to the scandal, but to the story underneath it. The betrayal wasn't just salacious, it was familiar. Too familiar. People who had never met me reached out like we were old friends. Men who'd been discarded after supporting families. Women whose siblings had slept with their spouses. Strangers who had spent years giving and were left with nothing but silence when they needed help. I became more than a name. I became a symbol. I didn't ask for it, but I didn't reject it either. I remember the moment I realized how big it had gotten. I was in the corner booth of a diner, nursing a refill of coffee I couldn't afford and charging my phone under the table. The waitress came over, blinked twice, and whispered, "Wait, are you that guy?" I nodded once. She didn't ask for details. Just topped off my mug and said, "You deserved better." Then she slid me a slice of apple pie on the house. After that, the offers started coming in. Local news wanted to follow up. A podcast reached out, asking if I'd do an exclusive episode. A lawyer from Richmond emailed me, pro bono services, in case I wanted to sue for defamation or emotional distress. I wasn't ready for all that. Not yet. But I saved every message, every offer, because I knew this moment wouldn't last forever. Public attention is fickle, but truth lingers, and I was finally standing in it. I got a prepaid phone with some of the donation money people had sent. Started keeping my calls short. My replies direct. I didn't want the attention to turn me into something I wasn't. I didn't want to milk this. I just wanted to rebuild. Still, I'll admit, The moment I saw Terrence's face surface in a meme, I let out a laugh that came from somewhere deep. The meme said, "Imagine calling your best friend brother for 10 years just to become his ex-wife's roommate." The photo they used was grainy but unmistakable. Terrence at a rooftop bar, probably from a social post he didn't think anyone would connect. Celia wasn't in the frame, but the Charleston skyline behind him confirmed the location. And that's when the second wave hit. Someone had gone digging and posted screenshots of the real estate listing, the Charleston condo, alongside public records showing the buyer, Celia Marie Camden. The comments were merciless. Wait, she used the insurance money to buy a love nest? She didn't even wait 3 months? Bruh. Marcus played the long game and still won. I hadn't even released the full details of the reversion clause. But someone out there had done the math, and they started connecting dots faster than I could keep up. That night, I got a call from Layla. "You're not going to believe this," she said, voice vibrating with energy. "The story's gone global. Picked up by 3 different international outlets. I've had producers from 2 networks reach out asking if you'll sit down for a feature." I rubbed my eyes, trying to process it all. What did I even do? I asked. I just told the truth. "That's the thing," she said. "Most people don't. You didn't try to dress it up or hide it. You gave me the receipts. You didn't scream or throw punches. You let the facts burn brighter than the fire." I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. She added, "Also, just a heads up. You might want to keep an eye on your ex's social. She's either about to disappear or say something stupid." Sure enough, an hour later, Celia posted a note to her Instagram story. White text, black background. The classic guilty person format. "People don't know the whole story. Please respect my privacy." The comments under her last picture, her and Terrence smiling on that Charleston balcony, turned radioactive. She turned them off within the hour. Then she disabled her account. Terrence never posted a thing. I guess silence finally found them. And that night, for the first time in weeks, I stretched out in the back seat of the car and slept. Not well, not warm, but without bitterness. Because the world saw me now. Not the version of me they painted. Not the failure Celia had written off. Not the friend Terrence thought was too soft to fight back. But the man who cooked, served, lost everything, and still rose. And I wasn't done yet. It didn't start with a bang. It started with a letter, quiet, concise, and stamped with the weight of law. 2 pages. 4 paragraphs. 1 demand. I filed the injunction at exactly 9:02 a.m. on a Tuesday. By noon, Celia's lawyer had called mine twice. See, people forget that paperwork is a form of power. It doesn't yell. It doesn't threaten. It just sits in ink and dares you to ignore it. And in the fine print of that divorce agreement, the clause she never thought I'd catch was the beginning of her unraveling. She used the insurance money from our destroyed home. The very place I paid for, maintained, and lost to buy a new condo. But the clause was clear. If she failed to reinvest the payout into a qualifying property within 90 days and didn't secure proper written release from me, she would forfeit partial ownership of that purchase. She didn't read the clause. Terrence didn't know it existed. Their $620,000 fresh start in Charleston had my name stitched under the drywall. Legally, I now owned 50% of it. I didn't need to show up. I didn't need to scream or argue. The court order did all the talking. Celia had filed the purchase too fast, eager to post balcony photos and smiling boomerangs of wine glasses clinking under golden hour. Too fast to notice the landmine waiting in the foundation. My lawyer, a mild-mannered woman named Priya Mehta, called me 2 days after the injunction was approved. She didn't gloat. She didn't brag. She just said, "They never expected you to get back up." "No," I said, "they expected me to disappear." We froze Celia's access to the property first. That was easy. Then came the more poetic part, establishing that Terrence had no stake in the condo. He wasn't on the deed. He didn't sign the mortgage. No co-owner. No lease. No title claim. He was, by all definitions, a guest. A squatter, if I felt cruel. But I didn't want him out. Not yet. I wanted him to read the letter I sent instead. It arrived at their door the following Friday. Certified. Signed. Inside was a notice of co-ownership, a breakdown of equity percentage, and a formal rent invoice, backdated to the day he moved in. For months. He owed me $5,800. It wasn't about the money. I didn't need it. It was the principle. For every dinner he sat through at my table, acting like my brother, while screwing my wife behind my back, for every time he ignored my call, dismissed my friendship, or raised a glass to my downfall. This was the bill. He called that night. Blocked number. I let it ring. Then, for reasons I still don't fully understand, I answered. Marcus, he said, his voice hoarse like he'd just swallowed his own pride, and it got stuck halfway down. I didn't say a word. You filed rent charges? Still, I said nothing. There was a pause, then a nervous chuckle. I mean, come on, man. That's funny. You got jokes. I took a breath. Measured. No, I said. I've got paperwork. Celia didn't know. She didn't. She did. I cut in. She just didn't think I'd do anything with it. Look, man, he said, his voice losing that edge of confidence. We were friends. Brothers. This isn't you. You're right, I said. The old me wouldn't have done this. Another silence. Then, softer. So what do you want? I want the same thing you toasted to, I said. Freedom. He didn't reply. I hung up, and with that, the shift was complete. The internet picked it up almost immediately. Someone leaked the letter, probably someone from the condo building. A screenshot of the rent demand made the rounds on Twitter, tagged with plot twist. He owns the condo and charges rent to the dude who stole his wife. The comments were savage. That's not revenge. That's real estate poetry. He didn't get mad. He got title deed. Celia stayed silent. Publicly, anyway. But I knew the walls were closing in. Her new home, her symbol of escape, her declaration of independence, now carried my name in the land records. I wasn't trying to ruin her life. I wasn't interested in dragging her through court or clawing back everything just to watch her bleed. That's not who I am. I just wanted her to know that I wasn't the fool they believed I'd stay forever. That I read the fine print. That I was still standing. That Sunday dinner was over and the check had come. The most surprising part? I didn't feel triumphant. I felt calm, clean, even. Like I'd swept the floor of my past, and all that was left was space. Not for vengeance. For something better. For myself. I never wanted a restaurant. That was Terrence's dream, not mine. He used to sketch logos on napkins, talk about fusion menus and rooftop seating. I just like feeding people. That was enough for me. Sundays were my kitchen, my cathedral. And after the fire, after the betrayal, after the silence, I realized I didn't want revenge as much as I wanted my table back. Just not for them this time. So I bought a food truck. It wasn't fancy. The outside was dull white with fading decals and the ghost of some taco brand peeling off the side. The engine coughed on cold mornings. But it ran. It moved. And it gave me a stove, a grill, a small fridge, and most importantly, a new kind of table. I called it Sunday Served. I didn't advertise. No flyers. No grand opening. I just parked it in Maple Park, across the street from the old courthouse, right where Celia and I used to walk after dinner, back when I still believed her smile meant something. I pulled open the side window, flipped the open sign, and turned on the burners. I made what I always made, comfort food, simple, filling, done with love. Chili rubbed chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, cornbread so soft it felt like an apology. My mom's meatloaf recipe. I plated it in brown paper trays, added a little handwritten note to each one that just said, "You matter." That first day, I gave it all away. Free. No tips. No questions. People came slowly at first. A man with a walker. A woman in scrubs who looked too tired to speak. A mom and her kid, the little girl eyeing the tray like she hadn't eaten a hot meal in days. I handed them food and smiled. That was it. By the end of the day, I was out of everything. A retired vet walked up as I was wiping the counter down. He handed me a 50 and said, "You're standing for all of us who got left behind." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. Said, "Thank you." But inside, something shifted. The next day, Angie showed up. She was the custodian from our old apartment building, quiet, kind, the kind of person most people ignored. Not Celia. She used to bark at her about dust in the elevator corners. I always apologized. Angie would nod and say, "You're not the problem." She walked up to the truck, looked at the menu board I'd scribbled with chalk, and said, "You need help?" I laughed. "Can't pay much. Might not pay at all." She shrugged. "Still beats cleaning up after people who don't see you." That was all it took. By week 2, she was taking orders, wiping counters, dropping off trays at benches where the elderly sat with bowed heads. She had a system, fast and graceful. She called everyone Han. And when I wasn't looking, she added music to the speaker, Motown, old soul, Nina Simone humming through the afternoon breeze. The regulars came fast. There was a man who worked construction 2 blocks over, called me chef, even though I never asked him to. A high school kid who played saxophone on Saturdays for tips, he played near our truck now, drawing more people in. And then there was Ruth. Ruth was maybe 60. Wore scarves like armor and handed out stories like napkins. She'd stop by every other day for cornbread and sweet tea, then linger to talk about her late husband, her garden, her daughter who hadn't called in years. "You listen like you know what it's like," she said once. "I do," I told her. One Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks after I opened, I looked up and saw a line. An actual line. Not long, not viral, but enough to feel like a beginning. Enough to make me believe people still showed up when the food was honest and the heart behind it was real. Angie leaned out the window and hollered, "We need more cornbread, boss." I smiled. On it. And as I turned to mix another batch, I realized something strange. I felt full. Not in the stomach. In the soul. The ache in my chest that had sat there since the fire, since the call, since the first cold night in that car, was easing. It wasn't gone. But it wasn't choking me anymore. That night, I sat in the back of the truck after we closed. The park had gone quiet. Angie had gone home. The grills were off. My hands smelled like garlic and flour. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt like I was home. Not because of a roof. Not because of walls or framed photos. But because I had built something with my hands. And this time, I wasn't building for people who took and never stayed. I was building for people who saw me. People who said thank you. People who came back. And that was more sacred than any Sunday I'd ever known. I saw him before he saw me. Terrence. Standing near the park bench, hands shoved in his pockets like he didn't know what to do with them. His shoulders were rounded, his expression unreadable. No camera crew. No friend to shield him. Just him. Alone. That surprised me more than anything. It had been a month since the rent letter. A month since I claimed my half of the condo he thought was his castle. Celia had gone quiet, disappeared from the internet entirely. And Terrence? He vanished too. No smug tweets, no stories, no rooftop drinks. I figured he'd retreat to some new circle, some new narrative. But there he was. In line at Sundays served like any other customer. Angie noticed him before I did. "That's him," she said under her breath, eyes narrowing. "You want me to tell him to leave?" I shook my head. "No. Let him order." Her eyebrows raised, but she didn't press. I went back to grilling chicken thighs, the sizzle loud enough to drown out the sudden static in my chest. My hands didn't shake. I didn't flinch. But I felt it, a low thrum of something old and unfinished rising in my ribs. He stepped up to the window 10 minutes later. No one noticed. No one pointed. He was just another face in the crowd, just another man asking for food. "Hey," he said, voice low. "Didn't think you'd still be here." "I am," I replied. "Didn't think you'd show your face." He nodded, eyes dropping to the counter. "Yeah, I get that." I waited. He glanced back over his shoulder, then leaned in slightly. "Look, I didn't come to make a scene." "Good," I said, flipping the chicken. "Because there isn't one left to make." He stood there, awkward, uncomfortable. Like he'd expected more venom. Like he thought I'd yell or throw a plate or chase him off with a ladle. But I didn't. I didn't need to. "After a beat," he said. "I was drunk that night. The call. I didn't mean for you to hear it." I looked him in the eye then. "That's what makes it worse. Drunk minds don't lie. They just stop editing." He swallowed, nodded once. "I thought," he started, then stopped. "I thought if I apologized." "Don't," I said. "Don't twist this into a redemption arc. You're not the victim, Terrence. You didn't trip into Celia's bed by accident. You didn't forget I was your best friend. You just stopped caring." He opened his mouth again, then closed it. The lines around his eyes looked deeper. The smirk he always wore had vanished, replaced with a kind of dull remorse I wasn't sure I believed yet. I didn't want a speech, so I handed him a tray. Barbecue chicken, mac and cheese, cornbread, just like I served every other stranger who walked up to my window with empty hands. He stared at it, confused. "You're giving this to me?" "You paid your price," I said. "Just not the one you expected." He took the tray slowly, like it might burn him. "Why are you doing this?" "Because grace doesn't mean forgetting," I said. "It means feeding people who wouldn't feed you." He didn't know what to say. He stood there for a moment longer, then turned and walked away, tray balanced in both hands like he was carrying something heavier than food. I turned back to the grill. Angie didn't ask. She just passed me another plate. Next, she called. A woman stepped up, mid-30s, tired eyes, toddler tugging at her coat. She smiled at me like I was more than just a man behind a counter. Like I was someone who mattered. "I think you served me last week," she said, brushing hair from her eyes. "My kid ate all of it before I even got home." I smiled. "Guess we'll just have to double up today." She laughed, soft and grateful. We served 62 people that day. Ran out of cornbread by 4 p.m., ran out of chicken by 5. But I didn't care. The truck smelled like smoke and seasoning. My apron was streaked with sauce. My fingers ached from the work. But my soul felt full. Later that evening, as I was scrubbing the grill and Angie wiped down the counter, I caught sight of the trash bin under the big oak tree near the edge of the park. Terrence's tray was there. Empty. Clean. He hadn't thrown it in the street. He hadn't left it on the bench. He finished the meal. It didn't mean I forgave him, but it meant he understood something now. And that was enough. We closed up for the night. Angie offered to walk with me to the car, but I told her I'd stay a little longer. Just to breathe. I sat on the park bench, the same one Terrence had stood beside just hours earlier, and watched the last light of evening stretch across the grass. The food truck stood behind me, quiet now, its little closed sign swinging slightly in the breeze. It wasn't a house. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine, and I'd filled it with more love, more kindness, and more truth than any 10 years I'd wasted on the wrong table. The wind picked up. I pulled my coat tighter and leaned back. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vindicated. I was something else. Whole. I saw her in aisle 6. Of all places, the hardware store. I was there picking up a new propane hose and a replacement burner plate for the food truck. I'd been meaning to fix the sputtering left side burner for a week. Figured a quiet Tuesday afternoon would be a good time. I turned the corner near the plumbing fixtures, and there she was, Celia. She didn't see me at first. She was standing near a display of paint swatches, holding a sample card in one hand and chewing lightly on her thumbnail. Her hair was tied up in a loose bun, nothing like the sculpted style she used to wear. Her makeup, if there was any, was minimal. There was a hollowness around her eyes I hadn't seen before. Not tired, not broken, just different. She looked up, and our eyes locked. For half a second, neither of us moved. It was the kind of silence you could trip over if you weren't careful. I expected her to walk away. I expected myself to turn around. But neither of us did. Instead, she tucked the swatch back into the metal rack and walked over slowly. "Marcus," she said softly. Not surprised. Not hostile. Just measured. "Celia." She glanced down at my hands, spotted the hose and burner plate. "Still working the truck?" I nodded. "Every day." She smiled, tight-lipped, but real. "You look different." "So do you." A beat passed. "You look better," she added, almost like she regretted saying it. "Healthier. Lighter." I gave a half shrug. "Cooking food that makes people feel seen will do that." She laughed quietly, but there was no mockery in it. Only memory. "You always had a gift for feeding people." I didn't reply. She shifted her weight, then looked around as if expecting someone else to walk up and save her from the awkwardness. No one did. "You really don't hate me?" she asked, eyes searching mine for something familiar. I let the question hang. I thought about every Sunday I spent trying to earn smiles from people who never offered one back. I thought about the fire, the cold car, the silence, the call. I thought about Terrence's voice, the smirk in it. I thought about the tray I handed him last week. And then I thought about the food truck. About Angie's humming. About Ruth's scarf collection. About the little girl who always saved a piece of cornbread for her mom. About the vet who called me a symbol. About the stranger who called me brother. "No," I said, finally. "I don't hate you." Celia blinked. "I don't know if I deserve that." "You don't," I said, not unkindly. "But that's not the point." She looked down at the metal shelves, at the dozens of screws and bolts organized in quiet rows. "I made a lot of mistakes." "So did I said. "Mine was thinking love meant being quiet while I disappeared." She nodded. "I think I was scared of how visible you made me. You always showed up with your whole heart. And I didn't know how to carry that. So I put it down." There it was, her first real admission. No excuses. No blame. Just truth. "I stopped serving people who don't bring anything to the table," I said. Celia gave a sad smile. "That sounds like a line you say to someone right before you walk away." "It is," I said. "And I'm walking." She didn't follow. She just nodded again, slower this time, like she finally understood that I wasn't performing strength, I had actually found it. I paid for my supplies and walked out into the sunlight. It was early afternoon, warm enough to shed the jacket. The truck was parked 2 blocks over, just behind the community center. Angie was already there, setting out the compost bins and wiping down the side window with lemon spray. "Got the part," I said, holding it up. "You bring lunch too?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Working on it," I replied with a grin. We opened late that day, just 30 minutes behind schedule, but the line still formed. No one complained. They waited. They always did. I grilled marinated chicken thighs, added fresh rosemary to the rice, threw in roasted carrots, and topped the trays with a drizzle of lemon honey glaze I'd been experimenting with. Angie handled the orders like a pro, calling names, handing out napkins, telling jokes. Someone brought a radio, and soft music drifted into the air, cutting the late afternoon heat. A little boy named Leo waved at me through the service window. He came by twice a week with his grandmother. He always asked if I had the fun sauce, his name for the tangy aioli I'd created by accident one day. I passed him a tray with extra. "This one's got double fun," I told him. He laughed so hard he dropped his fork. His grandmother thanked me like I was serving magic. I leaned back, wiped sweat from my brow, and looked around. This was my table now. No linen. No crystal glasses. No fake toasts or half-hearted blessings. Just people. Real people. Saying thank you. Saying nothing. Coming back. By sunset, we were out of chicken. Again. I sat at the picnic table under the willow tree behind the truck. The last light filtered through the branches like golden mist. Angie sat beside me with a soda, her shoes kicked off, ankles crossed. "You ever think about what's next?" she asked. I thought about that. About growth. About peace. About not needing next to feel whole. "Not really," I said. "Peace doesn't need a sequel." She clinked her chin lightly against mine. "To Sundays that actually mean something." I raised mine. "To food that feeds more than hunger." We didn't need more words. The night had spoken enough. And as I looked around at the truck, the people leaving with trays, the soft rustle of paper bags and laughter, I realized something I hadn't known until right then. Peace doesn't shout. It simmers. And it tastes like real food.